Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started into part 3, which is communicating with difficult patients. And one principle that I want you to really adhere to whenever you're dealing with difficult patients or even difficult families or bystanders that are associated with the call that you're running is your goal is to diffuse the situation and not add to it. And if you come in with an attitude, then it's going to be picked up on pretty quickly, and it may not make the situation any better. Your job is to make the situation better, not worse. So the main way you can diffuse the situation is by staying calm. Staying calm and not letting the stress of the scene get to you. Sometimes it's hard to do because sometimes you're being called names, people yelling, screaming, and you just want to yell yourself. But whenever you get out of control or you seem out of control or you're yelling and screaming, that just makes things worse. So you also want to be honest with your patients, or bystanders or whatever. If you are being deceitful or lying, that's just going to make them more upset and make them even more difficult to deal with. And always consider your safety, okay? Because it is very, very important that your safety comes first and that you ensure that you and your partner are able to provide care without harm coming to you. Because if you are afraid, well, then that's going to stick out too. And you want to seem calm and collective and under control. So, what about communicating with older patients? Older patients can pose a problem sometimes because they may be suffering from conditions like dementia or Alzheimer's that may make it difficult to communicate with them. They can also suffer from other issues like past strokes where it's hard for them to speak, or maybe it's hard for them to see because they have cataracts or they have impaired vision, or they're unable to speak well. But you want to be vigilant for changes because sometimes a patient may have a normal baseline, but if there's and their normal baseline may be that they're hearing impaired. But if something else has changed and now they're visually impaired and they're not usually visually impaired, well, then that may be something that you want to note and be concerned about. Whenever you have your patients and you're interviewing older patients, you want to identify yourself. And don't assume that they know who you are, because remember, we walk in and sometimes we look like other professions. Some places you might look like a janitor. Trust me, I've been asked many times to take the garbage out. Places you look like police or security guards. I've been asked to take care of security situations as well. So you want to make sure that you identify who you are and why you're there. Be aware that the way that you present yourself has a lot to do with the overall scene and how you're going to be able to interact with this patient. If you act frustrated or impatient, they're going to see that through your body language, and they may not feel like that you have their best interest at heart. Look directly at the patient whenever you're talking to them. That lets them know that you care. Speak slowly and distinctly because they may be hearing impaired and they may be trying to read your lips. Explain what you're doing and use terms that they can understand. If this elderly person is a retired physician, they may understand your jargon, but if they're not, then they may need you to tone it down just a little bit. Listen to them. Let them give you answers. Don't just rush them through it. Show the patient respect, and you use titles like Mr. and Miss. Don't say sweetie and hun and all that stuff. Treat them with respect. These are individuals that have been on this planet for a lot longer than we have. They've done more than we have, and they deserve the respect that they have earned. Don't talk about the patient in front of them because it makes them feel like that they may not have a say in their health care. And be patient with them. Another thing that I want you to do is whenever you have an elderly patient or an older patient, give them time to pack their things, personal items that they may need. Some elderly people are extremely cold, some like it hot. Let them grab their favorite items that will make them more comfortable. Also, they may need hearing aids, glasses, or other things that can help them with their daily tasks, like canes or walkers and stuff. Allow them the time to gather those things up and help them out. Children, emergency situations to a child is frightening because they're used to their little world with mom, dad, brothers, sisters, aunts, uncles. They're used to that. And then all of a sudden something happens and bam, here are all these strangers coming in. There's lights going off everywhere. Sirens are going. I have no idea who this is. Whenever they touch me, their equipment's cold. They're sticking me with needles and stuff. So can be very afraid. And that fear can make it difficult to communicate with them. So your uniform, the ambulance, and, the crowd of people gathering around them, well, that crowd of people could be you and the firemen, policemen. It doesn't have to be a huge crowd. So when you have a child, let them keep their favorite toy, doll, or security blanket with them. It can help comfort them and make it a little easier for you when you're trying to treat them. If possible, have a family member or loved one stay with them. But however, do not compromise safety for the patient or the child. If it is possible to let the parent or guardian hold the child, let them do it. But like when you're transporting the patient should be transported in a child safety seat that is secured in place properly, or some type of securing device. There's some devices that you can use to secure them to the stretcher, and you may need to do that as well. So just make sure you're following your local protocol and procedures and stuff, and just don't put them on the stretcher because they're not built to just sit on the stretcher. And please do not put the parent on the stretcher and put them in the parent's arms and think that's okay, because it's not. Be honest with kids. Kids do not like dishonesty. If something's going to hurt, don't tell them it's not going to hurt, because then they're not going to trust you, and you want to build that trust up, okay? Respect the child's modesty. Now, just because they're a child does not mean that they're not embarrassed to be naked or have their clothes taken off. Protect the modesty of the child, and just keep in mind that you're there to help keep them comfortable. And if you are doing procedures and stuff, you may want to shield that from the general public. Speak in a professional, friendly way, but remember, jargon's probably not good here. Just put it on their level, but be professional and friendly. Maintain eye contact and position yourself at the child's level. Don't stand over them, because standing over them is intimidating to them and can be contrary to what you're trying to do. Alright, hearing impaired patients. The majority of your hearing impaired patients are going to have normal intelligence, and are not embarrassed by their disability. They've embraced it and they know how to deal with it. And there's some things that you can do to help them. One, let the patient see your lips, because that can help them understand what you're saying. If they have hearing aids, please gather them up for them so that they can utilize them. If you're in an accident and maybe they've fallen out, take a little bit of time if patient situations dictate if you can do this, okay? Because if the patient's critical, then you can't take time looking for hearing aids. But if they're minor or whatever, take time and look for the hearing aids and stuff. And ask the family about hearing aids, because they may be able to gather them up for you. Steps to take to effectively communicate with a hearing impaired. Have a pen and paper available so that they can write down answers, or you can write questions and let them read it. If the patient can read lips, face the patient and speak slowly and distinctly. Never shout at them, because it doesn't matter how loud you shout, it's not going to do any good. And listen carefully. Ask short questions and give short answers. Learning some sign language could be very helpful. And here are just 3 examples of some things that you could learn, like sick is there to the left, hurts in the middle, and helps to the right. It would be a good idea if you could take a class on sign language. I would love to. I haven't. I'm going to go ahead and just tell you I haven't, but it would be probably a very good thing to do. Visually impaired, you may want to ask the patient if they can see at all. Visually impaired patients are not necessarily completely blind. I remember when I was in high school, I had my English teacher was visually impaired. She was legally blind, actually, but she was a very good English teacher. So expect your patient to have normal intelligence, and explain everything you're doing as you're doing it so that they can kind of understand what's going on. Stay in physical contact with your patient as you begin your care, and this also lets them know that you're there and you're taking care of them and they're not alone. If the patient can walk to the ambulance, place his or her hand on your arm so that they can follow you. Transport mobility aids such as a cane with the patient to the hospital. And then we're going to talk about dogs too, because guide dogs are very important to some visually impaired or just some impaired patients at all, because there's a lot of different guide dogs out there. But visually impaired, very important. Their dogs usually become very loyal to them and are trained to stay by their side. So they're identified by the special harness that they utilize. And if possible, transport the dog with the patient, because it alleviates the stress for the patient and the dog, because the dog can be very stressed away from their owner. And if you cannot, make sure you arrange for care of the dog so that someone's there to take care of them. Because if you're taking the patient to the hospital and they're going to be in the hospital for a week or so, someone needs to take care of their dog, because if something happens to this dog, they may not get another one. And this really helps their quality of life. So non-English speaking patients, you must find a way to obtain a medical history. You can ask bystanders that may speak the same language, or family members or loved ones who might be bilingual. If the patient speaks some English, use the English that they can understand. Okay, use short, simple questions. Point to parts of the body. Have a family member or friend interpret if you can, and consider learning some common phrases in other languages used in your area. Also, remember that our smartphones have applications now that can help us communicate with non-English speaking patients. And then there's patients with special needs. One thing you want to do is you do not want to overlook the needs of people with communication disorders. We're there to help everybody regardless. But you want to take time. There may be some aids or something that they utilize that you may want to bring with you that will help with the communications process. Touch and eye contact are helpful in bridging mechanisms that will help you communicate with them, because they may know that, hey, somebody's here, they're taking care of me, or so on. And family members, that's going to be your greatest resource here, because they've dealt with this and they know exactly how to communicate with them in one way or the other. So, well, that just sums up the communicating with a difficult patient. Our next slideshow will be communicating with healthcare professionals.